3 cars, 36 cylinders and 2,644 brake horsepower. Welcome to a celebration of the mighty V12. The reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. That's how it must feel to be a V12 engine in 2025.
It's been countless years since we first heard of the impending demise of the 12-cylinder combustion engine, but car manufacturers keep finding ways to prolong its life, and there's one very good reason for that.
People buy them. This car's predecessor, the Aventador, sold 11,500 units during its 11-year production run, and that's quite a lot for a hypercar. So, funnily enough, those same customers insisted that this new model had to have a V12. Nothing else would do. But there has been one little compromise, because the Revuelto is the only car here that uses a hybrid powertrain.
That's right, in addition to its V12, the Revuelto has a lithium battery pack and electric motors. And while that might sound contradictory in a 6.5 litre naturally aspirated V12, know one thing: the electrons are there first and foremost to make the Revuelto even faster.
I will be shocked if this car isn't the fastest feeling one here. It's got 1,001 brake horsepower, and you don't reach that peak power until over 9,000 RPM. Oh, I mean, listen to that engine. There's not as many pops or crackles or shrieks as you got with the Aventador, but the bass soundtrack is still proper Lamborghini V12, and it's also plenty loud enough. Well done, Lamborghini. I mean, listening to this engine, it does cross my mind, is there really batteries and electric motors? Would anyone know if they weren't there? I'm not so sure. This isn't like any hybrid I've ever heard before.
Well, believe it or not, the Revuelto's tiny 3.8 kilowatt-hour battery pack does make a difference. It provides drive to the front wheels via 2 110 kilowatt electric motors, as well as a further one integrated into the 8-speed dual-clutch gearbox.
One side of that is that you've got 6 miles of all-electric range in a Lamborghini hypercar. Nice. The other side of that is that, unlike in the Aventador, the V12 engine now only powers the rear wheels, which somehow feels very fitting. Special mention also goes to the 8-speed automatic gearbox that sits in a transverse arrangement behind the engine, and it is miles better than the one you got in the Aventador. It's better in automatic mode, it's better in manual mode, it's much snappier, and together with the torque feel that you get from the electric motors, the runs of acceleration are just so seamless, and there's no interruption in power.
The gearbox is just one of the instances that show the Revuelto is more than just a reimagined Aventador. The carbon tub has also been revised and sits in the middle of a front subframe, now carbon fibre, and rear element made of high-strength aluminium alloys.
The basic chassis is 25% stiffer and 10% lighter than the Aventador's, but presumably because of all the electric components, this car weighs in at about 300 kilos heavier, and so it comes at about 1.9 tons in total. It doesn't feel like that on the road, but you are very aware that the car is having to work extremely hard to follow your inputs. It's not effortless, but it is effective. It is a bit strange then that the steering is incredibly light, and it does mean that there's a slight disconnect in what you're doing on the wheel and then what the car's doing on the road, because you're never 100% sure that it's going to do exactly what you ask of it. And a lot of that, I think, is from the steering. Just feels a little bit disjointed, and there's just a bit too much uncertainty for my liking. But it is pointy and it is direct, and together with the rear wheel steering, it means that this car has an agility that you're just not used to from a big V12 hypercar like this. It almost feels more supercar than hypercar in the way that it rotates and it responds in the corners.
The Revuelto's 44/56 front-to-rear weight distribution helps with this, but it's also important to note that Lambo has ditched the active steering ratio of the Aventador and instead gone with the quicker, fixed setting. There is of course rear-wheel steer too, but the end result is a big V12 hypercar that handles like something much, much smaller.
You can cover ground incredibly quickly in this thing, and that's partly thanks to the all-wheel drive system, but also in the tamer drive modes, it is actually fairly easy to drive. You never got that in the Aventador. It was always the case of if you make a slight mistake, there's always the potential that it could take your head off. Not so in this. It's friendly-ish.
It's up for debate as to whether taming a Lamborghini defeats the point of it. It is by nature supposed to be a loud, leery hypercar, but there's no doubt that the Revuelto will have a broader appeal owing to its less knife-edge, less brutish character. It's still a raging bull, but this time it's been to finishing school.
Gotta say though, it's not all friendly. The low-speed ride is very firm. There's a lot of road noise and tyre noise, and even when you're in EV mode you can hear all sorts of whirring and whizzing, and I quite like it actually. It adds a bit of character, but yeah, it's not like a traditional EV or plug-in hybrid. And also I have to say, if you're wondering why I look a little bit uncomfortable, it's A, because the aircon is off so you can hear me, and B, this has got to be the most offset driving position I've driven in a new car in ages. My legs are pretty much pointing at you. That's a bit niche.
Despite all this, the Revuelto is a more usable car than its predecessor. It's got a much nicer, easier to get on with cabin with actual space. The comfort is, on the whole, an improvement, and the general experience is just more controlled. Yes, you could argue that the peaks of excitement aren't quite as high, but the baseline level of the experience has been increased purely because you can enjoy it more easily. But at the end of the day, it is still a Lamborghini hypercar and much of what goes with it. However, if you prefer your V12s more Bond than Briatore, then allow Ben to tell you all about the new Aston Martin Vanquish.
Now, the last time Aston did this, it was the DBS Superleggera, and I think it's fair to say that while it was a big step on from the DB11 in terms of driving, I think it wasn't as clearly differentiated as it might have been. That's different this time. The DB12 to the Vanquish, the step there is much bigger, much clearer differentiation, both visually and mechanically. The two models are still built around a bonded aluminium structure with a double wishbone front and multi-link rear, but the Vanquish gets more rigid and therefore responsive foundations. More obvious from outside is the wheelbase, which has been stretched to 80mm, all of it between the A-pillar and the front wheels to get the V12 sitting mostly behind the front axle. That stretch also contributes to better differentiated styling. It's in carbon fibre and it's certainly a gorgeous looking thing. Also got a redesigned interior. If you look in here, it is pretty familiar. This centre console here is laid flat now, with more horizontal appearance, but I do think this whole new cabin architecture that we've seen in Vanquish DB12 does feel special. This is a 330 grand car, but it does still feel like a nice environment. I think these high-tech screens, the mix of metal rollers, the leather, the carbon fibre, and they have done, the small details as well. Things like the fixings for the sun visors are in metal, so it does feel like a rich, kind of sophisticated environment. This time we've got the full-length panoramic roof as well, which really does open this cabin up. And despite the extra wheelbase in this car, 80mm of it, it's at the front of the car. So the DBS Superleggera before was a 2+2, the DB12 is a 2+2, so the Vanquish is actually a two-seater. You do get a little bit of space for your perfectly tailored luggage bag there, but the more important bit
is up front. That's 5.2 litre twin turbocharged V12. It's familiar from previous Astons, but this time it's the only front engined Aston sports car to get a V12.
The V12 is a twin turbocharged unit familiar from previous Astons, but the block and conrods are strengthened. There are uprated camshafts, reprofiled inlet and exhaust valves, faster spinning turbos and high flow injectors. There's also a boost reserve function that stores boost pressure on a steady throttle, so it's ready to go the instant you floor it.
It makes 824 brake horsepower, 738 pound-foot of torque. Oh, it is a monster as well. You know, it's a big step on from the DBS Superleggera and even the DBS 770 Ultimate. I think it's a lot of power, and there's no wonder the chassis needs some pretty special tricks to keep it all in check. I think for a car with so much power, you know, I was intimidated about driving this car before I actually got behind the wheel. It's so powerful. I think it does a good job of kind of easing you into it and making you feel comfortable and confident. A part of that is the driving position. It's a really nice driving position. I feel comfortable. My legs are straight ahead. I can't see the end of the cars, but I do have good visibility. I think that even the panoramic roof, you just get this sense of space and being able to place the car, I think, quite nicely. But it's also, you know, it's got very meaty feel to it. It's got very nice definition on the straight ahead. So it's a heavy-ish feel, very precise. There's no sloppiness around the dead ahead. Every little movement does something. It self-centers quite naturally. You know, sometimes with the E-Pass system, you can get quite an artificial feeling, but you've got that heft to it. And when you move it off center, it's not nervously quick, but it's very pointy and precise, and you've got that weight as well. So all those things kind of come together to make you feel confident to jump behind the wheel and start to push this car a bit harder. I've got it in the sports exhaust setting at the moment. I think it is a really nice kind of rich, cultured sound to it, really in keeping kind of Aston, what you'd expect of a Aston flagship. Gear shifts, we've got the ZF Speed 8-speed gearbox. They are not as quick shifts as a dual clutch box would be, but they are quick enough. But this thing, you know, it's got so much torque, it's always trying to light up the tyres. Thankfully we've got the multi-stage traction control on here, but it's an interesting engine. You've got the turbos, you've got a lot of boost going on. So let's just see with this engine then. So 824 horsepower, 2000 RPM, third gear. Not a lot now, 3, so just as you get 3 and then it's gone, and it really starts to kick with that torque. It does have that sort of slight lethargy and dead spot low down, but once it is lit, I keep lifting my foot a bit because I can feel it churning at the rear. I've got the traction control just sort of dialed out a little bit. It's definitely a serious feeling machine with a lot of performance. And the gear shifts are quick enough. It's a torque converter from ZF. Apparently they're a bit quicker. But I love the kind of rising note to this. It sounds really angry when you get it wound up.
Complementing the structural stiffening, we've got Bilstein DTX dampers with a bespoke calibration, uprated anti-roll bars, carbon ceramic brakes that shed 27 kilos all in, and a steering column that removes the isolation bushings for enhanced steering feel.
Now the ride with this car, Aston talks about it being the continent crusher. I think around town 30 and 40, even in the kind of softest mode GT, does have a bit of a tense feel to it sometimes. It's not quite as free as maybe it could be, but when you're out on an open road like this, you've got some speed under your wheels. It's got a lovely kind of long striding, supple feel. You know, it sacrifices maybe a little bit of control, but it's appropriate for that kind of GT setting. You can always tighten it up in sport as well. So I'm not sure about a continent crusher. We're not doing continents today, but we are. You know, it's absolutely monster in Cambridgeshire, put it that way.
The Vanquish also uses a host of electronic chassis systems. We've got a version of the adjustable traction control system that works so well in the Vantage and DB12, corner braking 2.0 that's said to be particularly handy during trail braking into a corner, but more important is the electronically controlled mechanical limited slip diff.
Now this is also the first time they put an E-diff, so electronically controlled differential, into the V12 flagship, and I suspect that because of the wheelbase stretch, you've got a longer wheelbase, you've also got a V12 over the nose. If you put an aggressive mechanical locking diff in to deal with all that torque that's going through, the weak link really should become the front end. So you've got a lot of traction at the back, and then the front starts to push. So presume the advantage with the E-diff is it allows them to, get the car rotated into the turn with the diff effectively completely open when you're off throttle, and then as you come out of the corner, you get on the power, it starts to lock up and it gives you that drive. I think if we, it wasn't even sliding there, but you can just feel it very, very pronounced sort of drive from the rear, very hooked up feel. That's very, very satisfying. He's got a pretty leggy final drive, this car as well, 2.93 to 1, I think it is. And that'll be key to the top speed, the 214 miles an hour, faster than any series production Aston, but it doesn't feel like the ratios are too long or it's taking too long to get into its stride. Once you're through that turbo lag, this thing really takes off. And yeah, so that stride to the suspension, to the ride, does help you get that power down, gives you that kind of elasticity beneath your wheels that helps with traction, gives you confidence, you're not being bounced offline all the time. Obviously sacrifices a little bit of body control, but I think that's still very good. On the road, British B road like this in GT mode, it really suits this car perfectly.
The Aston Martin Vanquish is a great car, but there is a certain rival from Maranello that threatens to make its life a touch more difficult.
Welcome to the Ferrari 12Cilindri, better known as the 12Cilindri. It rivals the Ferrari LaFerrari as having one of the most unimaginative names ever, but let's face it, it still sounds great, in more ways than one.
Still sounds good. It's a bit quieter than it was before though. Which is your favourite sound of the three cars? Let us know in the comments.
If you're wondering whether this is a reshelled version of the 812 Superfast, Ferrari is adamant that it's not, and there's a very good reason for that. Back when the 812 was launched in 2017, there was no SF90 hypercar, and thus the 812 was the most powerful, most expensive, most outrageous production Ferrari you could buy new.
Now, however, because of the SF90 and soon the F80, Ferrari's big V12 doesn't have to be as much of a leery sports car as it once was, and that means that the 12Cilindri can focus more on being a luxury sports grand tourer that revolves around a brilliant engine.
It is the same 6.5 litre naturally aspirated engine as was used in the 812, but it's in competizione spec, meaning 819 brake horsepower at 9,250 RPM, the exact same point of peak power as the Lamborghini. A lower final drive means 5% shorter ratios in low gears than the 812 Superfast, while there's also now an 8th gear at the top end.
Acceleration figures are the same, 0 to 62 miles an hour in 2.9 seconds, and that's largely because there's only so much you can do with rear-wheel drive and getting all that power down through just two wheels. But what Ferrari has done is modify the torque curve in 3rd and 4th gear, so you've got a more responsive, enjoyable experience at road speeds. And it definitely works. You can get into a really nice rhythm just using those gears. You can drop it down to 2nd if you want, but it doesn't always feel completely necessary. The gearbox is super crisp and responsive. It can be quite aggressive in the higher drive modes, but then what do you expect? The changes though are just absolutely spot on. Doesn't matter whether you're going up or down the box. It's a real event. And actually the whole powertrain, it's so silky. It just feels perfectly balanced and measured and linear, and it's a really enjoyable thing to use, even if it's not as loud as it was before. I mean, you can thank the emissions regulations for that, but I'd say the experience is 80–85% of the way there from a pure excitement point of view.
It does the everyday stuff better than the 812 and probably better than any other car on this test. I would like a comfier seat for my build, and the touch controls on the steering wheel are awkward as ever, but otherwise the cabin is thoughtfully appointed and packed with class. You'll notice the driver's seat has moved rearward a touch thanks to the shorter wheelbase, but the view out is still dominated by the huge V12 containing bonnet that stretches out far in front of you. It really should be a bit of a pig to maneuver, but somehow it's not.
You know what I really like about this car is the experience of driving it, even when you're not hammering along like you're in Forza Horizon. It's still a super enjoyable thing to drive at 7/10, at 8/10, and obviously if you want to push it more you can, but in most situations and with this much power you can't. So it is quite important what it's like below the limit. The steering is quick and responsive, very quick in fact. It's not blessed with feel, you don't usually get that with Ferraris, but it is intuitive enough once you get used to how quickly it changes direction. Despite the super aggressive rear wheel steering, it doesn't rotate and pivot through a corner in the same way that the Lamborghini can, but that's to be expected. This is front engine, that's mid engine, so there's always going to be a shortfall there. But what it does do is just give you more information through the car, through your seat.
Clearly, Ferrari's vast bundle of onboard tech is a huge part of why the 12-Cilindri feels so controllable and alert to inputs. There's active rear steering, Ferrari side slip control 8.0, which is 10% faster than before, virtual short wheelbase 3.0, and the incredible ABS Evo system that gives astonishingly good brake pedal feel.
I also like the driving position in this. The brake pedal feel is excellent. It's really sharp, but it's got brilliant bite. Overall, it's a satisfying car to drive, and it is very good fun.
I think the biggest question with the 12-Cilindri is whether Maranello has managed to sufficiently evolve the experience from the 812 Superfast. Some will say no, chiefly because the outright excitement levels peak a little bit lower, but for me, this car is, overall, a step forward over its predecessor.
The ride comfort is excellent, the refinement is very good. The cabin, although it's not perfect, I think it's the best of the three. It's got a lot going for it over the 812 and over the other cars on this test, but the only downside to this is, if you ask me hand on heart, would I buy a 12-Cilindri over an 812 and the excitement that that thing brings? I'm not sure I could honestly say that I would, because the V12 in that is completely unleashed, and with this, as I said, they've had to tone it down a bit, and that's the whole point of the car. So in that respect, yeah, I wish it was a bit more 812 still.
In truth, the very fact these cars exist in 2025 is cause for celebration. Loud, polluting, inefficient relics from a bygone era of excess and ostentation, there are many who would have them outlawed. But for us petrol heads, the Revuelto, the Vanquish and the 12-Cilindri are all on another level. These are the kind of cars that dig deep into your soul, fill your ears with glorious chaotic noise, and leave you wide-eyed and open-mouthed. They're fast, they're expensive, and they are still a little bit scary. But most importantly, they exist. Long live the V12.